Here's Hunter Biden in a piece that maybe tomorrow, Stu, will play in its entirety. It's like 5 minutes, and it is remarkable. He taped this conversation on his laptop. He's having a conversation with another artist who is helping him, with his art, and he talks about his father. Listen to this.
He's going to talk about drug reform and any other things that I want him to. He'll talk about anything that I want him to, that he believes in. If I say this is important to me, then he will work a way in which to make it a part of his platform. My dad respects me more than he respects anyone in the world, and I know that to be certain.
He goes on to talk about how I call my dad all the time, and we talk about policies, and he's going to talk about this, and he'll push whatever I want him to push. It's an extraordinary piece of audio, especially when Dad said, I don't know anything about anything. We don't talk about anything like that. He's making it very clear on this. Joe Biden knows and talks about all of it. But Joe Biden is kind of an interesting cat because I don't know if he's deliberately ignorant, if he is completely senile, if they won't let him watch television. I'm not sure. If you look at the economy right now and how people are feeling, this man is more out of touch, I think, than really anybody since the Tsar Nicholas. I mean, he was out of touch with the people. I think Joe Biden is approaching this. Listen to how he talks about our economy and how people are feeling right now. This is cut 6.
Consumer confidence at the lowest in 70 years, lower than the Great Recession, lower than the stock market crash of the 80s, lower than after 9/11. What can the White House do, or will it do, to instill some confidence in the American people and the economy?
Well, it's important to first level set on where we actually are economically, and we are in a transition. We are moving out of what has been the strongest economic recovery in modern American history to what can be a more stable period of growth where we don't have to sacrifice all of those economic gains. And the key, I think, here is that we face real challenges, and prices being first among them, but we also have real economic strengths. The strength of our labor market, the strength of household balance sheets, where notwithstanding people are reporting low confidence, they are also reporting record highs in terms of financial stability.
Stop for a second. Stu, do you know anyone who is feeling financially stable right now? Do you know anybody who's like, you know what, this is bad, but I've got so much money stacked away in the bank that I'm not worried about it?
Yeah, I mean, even people who are well off, I find. I mean, as you know, Glenn, we constantly gather in country clubs and have cocktail parties with elitists because we're conservatives. And when we do that, even those people, I mean, you even notice people who are well off and have a decent amount of resources, they have no idea how to protect them. Where do you put this stuff right now? You've mentioned gold earlier, which has held up really well as compared to pretty much everything else over this period. But you're in crypto, you're down. You're in tech stocks, you're down. You're in the S&P 500, you're down. You're in cash, you're definitely down because inflation is wiping you out slowly, even though you don't realize it. And all of this adds up. I mean, they keep saying this, that people have a higher amount of money, in their savings accounts. And it's just it's completely a ridiculous measure. They gave a bunch of free money to people and told them they couldn't go anywhere. So, yeah, a lot of people wound up over the COVID period saving some money because they were terrified of what was coming next. And that money is just slowly dwindling away. And over time, it will go away completely and we'll be in crisis.
Right. If it is kept in a bank, but I'm not sure it's being kept in the bank anymore. I think a lot of people have just blown through that. Not blown through it, but how many weeks can you fill your car once or twice a week at $120 a tank? How many weeks can the average person do that? I don't know. But I don't think very long. Biden goes on to say, this is when he was at the AFL-CIO, that problems are bad, but not like everywhere else.
Under my plan for the economy, we made extraordinary progress. And we put America in a position to tackle a worldwide problem that's worse everywhere but here.
And then he says inflation is not because of reckless spending. Cut 8.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
Okay.
What? Stop. Why is he
you
so
see
angry?
what he's saying here? He is, I don't know, because he's an old man and he's angry. You see what he just did? He said, I don't want to hear about this reckless spending anymore. It's all lies. We're changing people's lives. So what he's saying, as I interpret this, and I hate to interpret him because he may not have had any idea what he was talking about. But if you want to look at that logically, what he's saying is it's not the reckless spending that is causing all of these problems. That's a lie. We are changing people's lives, meaning we are getting off of all of the fossil fuels. We're changing the way the economy even is run. We're leaving capitalism and going into the Great Reset. All of these things have to be done, and it's going to be painful. And we're going to be saving people's lives because of this. I think that's a moment of real honesty where he's telling the American people, because he's done it before, this is going to be hard, but at the end of it, we're going to be better off because we won't be on fossil fuels.
Yeah, and I think it's important to look at what could have been here. Remember, Glenn, having a conversation with you, saying that, like, this is interesting in that we're seeing a real test of what conservatives believe about spending. We've talked about this for so many years, and spending's always been bad, and there's always been a problem. But our case was always, if you start going crazy, there is a breaking point. And there was the competing ideology of modern monetary theory. And we said during the time, like, look, we're just experimenting with this. We're going for it. We're going to print $4 trillion, $5 trillion. We're going to have all of this money coming from the Fed. And if there's not an effect from this, like, I don't know, does that prove our thesis wrong all this time? And here we go. Yeah. They do this. They now print another, then Biden comes in, they pass another multi-trillion-dollar bill, and we're seeing that the entire time, the conservative position on this was correct. Look at inflation and what's happening right now. It's destroying families. And I think it's important to remember that the Democrats wanted and almost got another $6 trillion of spending between 3 and 6.
Let me tell you, I want to end the program with a piece of audio on that very subject. We'll do that in just a minute. I want to play a piece of audio here that I think really says everything you really need to know about what is really happening in our country. Stu was just talking about inflation and saying, they could have had $3 to $6 trillion more, and everybody was for it. But people are now pretending that they weren't for it. Let me play this little flashback from Joe Scarborough on MSNBC. Listen.
This is pretty simple stuff. Let me say that again. This is pretty simple stuff. You get the head of the Progressive Caucus, you get Joe Manchin, and you get Joe Biden, and you put them in a room. And you say, we're not going to get out of this room until one of two things happen. One, we have a deal. Or two, we're going to have a press conference where we go out and announce that Joe Manchin does not support any piece of legislation regarding Build Back Better. We either have a bill or Joe Manchin will never support anything, and he's been lying to us for the past year and a half. It's very clear. And my God, I just wonder what would have happened if progressives had gotten their $6 trillion wish earlier this year.
Yeah, in an ironic way, you almost have to thank Joe Manchin for blocking that.
I wouldn't even say ironically thank Joe Manchin. You can just thank Joe Manchin if you're glad that interest rates aren't even higher.
I mean, look at that. He was saying to his audience and a group of experts, look, you just have to throw Joe Manchin under the bus. He's not going to go, but we can't stop this. We have to have this. Now, as if he never said any of that? Yeah, well, you got to thank Joe Manchin for that. These guys have no soul. There's just no soul left. Let me give you this story from CNBC. Raising children is expensive in the United States, and families are feeling the pressure. More than 12.5 million children in the U.S. live in poverty. Even middle-class families are increasingly struggling to pay for everyday expenses. Yeah, why is that? The U.S. Department of Agriculture has published a report using 2015 data that estimated expenses of child rearing from birth through the age 17 in a middle-income family of 2 adults and 2 children. It is $233,610. With inflation, that means it's $286,000 in 2022. But adjusting for inflation, they say, may not be enough. Child care costs have actually outpaced inflation. In 2020, child care expenses rose 5.03% year after year compared to the annual inflation rate of just 1.2 at the time. The fact that is sending an infant to daycare in many places across the country could be significantly more expensive than in-state public tuition to send them to college. The United States has been very reluctant, very conservative when it comes to these kinds of family policies. One of the issues with child care is the U.S. is a patchwork system. We have programs that fully subsidize eligible children. We have tax credits that subsidize a portion of child care cost for higher income families. We also have block grants for states to help them expand access. The problem with all these systems is that with this multitude of approaches, we're just not getting close to anything universal or affordable. Okay, so here's CNBC saying, really, we need pre-K money. We need more money, and we can't solve this problem state by state. It has to be solved at the federal government. Again, another crisis the government can take care of. Well, I don't know about you, but I get a little tired of working for everybody else. I pay my fair share. I pay more than my fair share. And I usually, I've never had a problem paying my taxes because I love the country and I'm willing to help others. I just think that helping others is not doing gender studies. I think helping others is not enforcing the idea that our public schools have to have open bathrooms with all of our kids and hide information from us parents. No, sorry. At what point do you start saying, I'm not really being represented here? Well, you can't, because we have representation. You vote for your representative. That's one of the problems with us, is we'll hire somebody, but they'll do the exact opposite, usually. Now, there's a great article in the Federalist about the student loan bailout. Because we saved and behaved responsibly, President Joe Biden will punish us. Nor is his plan fair to those who don't go to college. We put 5 children through college, one still attending. We saved up. We never took out any loans. We didn't want our kids burdened with debt. Our kids went to William and Mary, Mary Washington, Dartmouth, Johns Hopkins, and the University of Pennsylvania. So far, the total cost of these colleges has been well more than $600,000. Well, last week, Biden forced taxpayers to assume nearly $6 billion in federal student loans for 560,000 borrowers. News stories announced the decision on forcing taxpayers to pay off the loan for others, and it appears While some debt is likely to be paid off by taxpayers, Democrats will probably keep their other borrowers locked in politically by continuing to freeze repayments and warning that Republicans will end this. Should my wife and I have just borrowed all of this money and sent our kids to public universities? If so, we could have had $600,000 to spend on all sorts of other things, nicer cars, houses, fun trips, or we could have given that money to our children and grandchildren when we die. To save to pay for a family's college bills, we always purchased used cars, and we were a year old when we drove them for years. My Ford Taurus lasted 16 years, more than 225,000 miles. My Pontiac Transport for my wife lasted almost as long before Russ meant that it could no longer pass the state's yearly safety check. So because we saved up and behaved responsibly, President Biden is going to punish us, those who didn't save or work 90, 80-hour weeks, who spent their money on other nice things. Instead, now we are paying off and picking up their tab for their kids' education. How exactly is that fair? Nor is it fair to those who don't go to college. This is a great article that you really need to read at The Federalist. But I think this is the way a lot of people are going to start to feel. As we have shortages ourselves and shortages of money, how are people going to deal with the process that we are sending welfare checks and we're sending food stamps down to the border when we have hungry people here? By the way, the direct impact of the Fed is going to be felt again today. They are raising the rates of interest. So anything connected to the interest rates, that's credit cards, adjustable rate mortgages, or fixed rate mortgages that you haven't secured yet, all of this will change today and could change directly. They're trying to cool the economy, which means they're trying to get you to stop buying stuff. And it's pulling us into a recession if business investing and consumer spending is slowed too much. But they're going to get it right this time. So what it's going to do is it's going to make borrowing more expensive for companies, higher costs of capital. The valuation in the stock market is going to get compressed. We've already seen a lot of that happening right now, but this will be increased drag on your 401k or anything that you have that's a retirement fund. And the problem is that we're going up 0.75%. Stu, how much was it for each point just on the federal budget's borrowing?
Yeah, as rates tick up.
Do you remember?
Yeah, it's each percentage point costs us another $400 billion per year, which is the equivalent of adding a new Defense Department every year.
Oh my gosh. By adding a point?
Mm-hmm. 1 point. And it's something like $4 trillion over a decade. And it gets to a point where just the interest on our national debt becomes the focus of our entire budget eventually. I mean, we're not that far away from this becoming really a society that just repays debt rather than actually does things.